Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and it is such a thrill to be back with you, and I would imagine that you found the caption of our headline quite intriguing, particularly those of you who are familiar with auctions in Louisiana, and that headline being that Marvin Henderson's daughter has said daddy doesn't even have $20 to buy milk. We're talking about a gentleman who has touted his millionaire status in some articles in the past, and now we have his daughter saying, well, he doesn't have $20 to buy milk. Now, what will have prompted Marvin Henderson's daughter, Janet Henderson Cagley, to make such a statement? Well, that goes for those of you who are just now joining Sound Off Louisiana, because we always get a few new viewers. We have been covering for some time a lawsuit filed that was originally filed by Henderson Auctions in Livingston Parish. The defendant in that lawsuit is a gentleman named James Blake Everett. And Mr. Everett wasted little time saying, oh no, we're not about to try this in Livingston Parish, Marvin Henderson's home turf. There ain't no way that's happening. He retained an attorney, Mr. Richardson, out of Covington, Louisiana, and they transferred the matter to federal court since the defendants reside in Mississippi. And that's where it's been since. You may recall back in January, we brought you a feature wherein Mr. Henderson made an effort to get himself removed from this lawsuit, saying that he had not committed any fraud. We're going to give you a link to Judge Shelley Dick's ruling on that matter. These are her words, not mine. She said she found the arguments that Marvin Henderson did not commit fraud to be, and I quote, disingenuous. She outlined in her own ruling the 5 W's that needed to be answered: where, when, who, what, where, when, and why. And she answered them, and it was pretty some damning wording with regard to Marvin Henderson in that regard. So he still is sticking around in that lawsuit as being named as defendant for potentially having committed fraud. All right. Basically what the lawsuit entailed, it boiled down to a $100,000 discrepancy involving the sale of the Crown Casino. When they tried to auction it, the auction didn't go well. They went into private sale mode. What they ended up getting for the vessel was title to the Ivy House in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, plus some cash. And the cash portion is where the problem comes in. They actually got $450,000, okay? It was reported to Jeff Henderson and Janet Henderson Cagley that they got $350,000. The $100,000 difference is where all of the controversy lies on all of this. Jeff and Janet originally thought that Blake had cheated them out of that, when in reality Blake had actually wired that money to Marvin Henderson at his direct request, along with some other money that he had wired Mr. Henderson. And they did not know that at the time they filed their lawsuit. They learned about it in the lawsuit, and then they said, well, you had no business doing that. Daddy has nothing to do with this company. And so that's how Marvin Henderson found himself being named as a third-party defendant, with the assertion that if you want to assert that my client committed fraud, that would mean that your own father committed fraud. And we'll give you, like I said, we'll give you Shelley Dick's, ruling in that regard. But this is our last major update since that development. And they are now in the discovery phase of the litigation, and we have been able to obtain the depositions of Marvin Henderson, Janet Henderson Cagley, and Jeff Henderson, and we're going to hit just a little bit of the material today. This is going to be about a 5 or 6 part series, very similarly to what we did with the Craig Mills feature that we did. Now, the first we're going to show you right here, Janet Henderson Cagley is being asked about whether or not she knew about the money I just told you about, the $100,000. And we'll give you a link for this page from putting it right here. This is her responses to that question. And it says, well, no, I didn't know it wasn't discovered until the court case. And what did he tell you then? That yes, he and Blake agreed to split the money, the additional money that we weren't told about. And why did he not tell you? That's Marvin Henderson now. And why did he not tell you? And she responds, because he didn't want us to know about it, okay? And so with that revelation, during this deposition, Mr. Richardson decided to pursue the line of questioning, well, now that you do know about it, and that's the second link we're going to give you. Now that you do know about it, have you done anything to try to recover the funds? And here's her answer. Well, he said, let me ask you this question. Have you taken any action to recover this money from your dad? Her answer, no, he doesn't have it. Richardson, so are you planning on doing anything? Henderson, this is Janet Henderson. There's really nothing we can do. He doesn't have $20 to buy milk. All right, and that was the basis of your headline. And let me just say this. What is starting to emerge, you know, when you have children, you have a tendency to do with, putting them on an allowance. This is starting to look very much like a situation in reverse, where the longtime founder of this company, who literally is responsible for Henderson Auctions, being Marvin Henderson, that he's now being put on an allowance by his kids. And apparently that allowance is, he needs a little more, okay? And that was basically the reason that he would have asked from Blake to give him that money separately, keep it a secret from his kids. You may recall, shortly after the feature we did in January, where the business report made a bombshell revelation that there was a notation in Mr. Everett's wires that this money was going to Marvin Henderson for the purpose of him, and I'm quoting, pay Marvin Henderson's girlfriends, okay? We'll give you the link for that business report article, and we'll give you that little highlighted section. We'll do it in the text here of exactly what it said. It said to pay Marvin Henderson's girlfriends. And during Janet's deposition, there appeared to be some corroboration to the notation that was made on those wire transfers, and that's the next link that we're going to provide you with, and I'm putting it in front of the camera right here. This was material that Janet Henderson Cagley, as she tended to expand on a simple question, she said this voluntarily. She said, Blake, he is well aware that Dad liked to get money to give to young women. All right, right there. Gave a little bit of time. We're going to give you the link for it, but I'd like to just put it in the camera. Dad liked to get money to give to young women. And we had that discussion many times, specifically sitting in my office with Blake, that any money that was paid to Dad, loaned to Dad, or anything like that, JAH was not going to be responsible for. Now, Janet Henderson Cagley's own attorney, Mr. Scanduro, you can tell he's like, oh God, why did you volunteer that? And so you'll see the next little caption right there, Mr. Scanduro admonishing Janet Henderson Cagley, just stick to the question, okay? You may find that a little bit interesting. But I want to just give a little background here. Everyone would know Henderson Auctions as Henderson Auctions, okay? It's been around for about 60 years. Marvin Henderson founded the company. And yet the actual legal name to Henderson Auctions is JAH Enterprises, which virtually no one has any knowledge of. Now, many of you may recall Marvin Henderson did have felony conviction, and he was asked, okay, why was JAH formed? We're going to give you this link. This is in Marvin Henderson himself's deposition, okay? And this is the response. He's being asked, why was JAH formed? We're going to give you this link, and this is Marvin's response. Well, we dissolved Henderson Auction Company Incorporated, Henderson Brothers Auction, Henderson Equipment Company Incorporated, and Henderson Brothers Auctioneers, and we all went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy and dissolved those companies, and then formed JAH Enterprises, and JA Enterprises was a tool. I got that word circled because I found that an interesting choice of words on Mr. Henderson's behalf. JAH Enterprises was a tool that the business operated under. I won't elaborate any further other than to say I find the use of the word tool to be very interesting in that regard. Now, when the children found out through their own litigation, when the bombshell came out that Marvin Henderson had in fact secretly had that $100,000 wired separately to them, they had to then say, well, he still shouldn't have done it because he's not in any way affiliated with our company. Marvin executed a sworn affidavit saying, I am not a shareholder, I'm not an officer, I'm not a director. And we'll give you a link here. Mr. Richardson is starting to probe him in that regard, to lay a foundation, if you will, and we'll give you the link for this document. He says, so, do you have any kind of position or an officer's position with JAH? Marvin, well, not officially. Well, what do you do? What do you do unofficially? Marvin, I just do deals. Can you sign checks? Marvin, no, sir. Have you ever been able to sign checks? Marvin, not in many, many years. When do you think you stopped signing checks? Marvin, I don't think I've ever been able to sign checks since JAH was organized. And see, the problem here is that he's having to account for this money that in theory should have gone to JAH, but instead went to him. And so he's being quizzed, and we give you the link for that material as well. He's being quizzed about that, and he says, was that money on behalf of JAH? Richardson, were you drawing, this Richardson is Blake's attorney, were you drawing that money that you're talking about on behalf of JAH? And down toward the bottom, Marvin talks about, and that's what we're going to focus in on, down toward the very bottom, Mr. Richardson says, when you say our profit, who are you referring to? Marvin's answer, the profit that he and the personal pronoun I, were going to make on this deal. Now, he is Blake Everett. That's who he's referencing when he says he. So he says, the profit he and I were going to make together. And at that point, Richardson says, and it was going to be your profit? Marvin's answer, well, me and my company. Now remember, he's executed a sworn affidavit that says that he's not an officer, director, or has no association with JAH Enterprises, DBA Henderson Auctions. And so Richardson follows up, and your company being JAH? That's his answer. He specifically asked him, your company being? And he said, JAH. Now, I told you a moment ago that Scanduro immediately recognized that Janet Henderson had provided a little bit too much information, talking about the young ladies. Likewise, I'm sure that Mr. Scanduro cringed, literally, because you have to remember now, his job is to defend to defend Jeff and Janet. Marvin has his own attorney, and now you've got Marvin under oath saying this is my company, okay? And so the last link we're going to provide you with is literally Stephen Scanduro trying to undo what Marvin had said earlier in the deposition. Now this is right toward the conclusion of Marvin's deposition, and so this is Scanduro. Okay, some parts of Scanduro being Jeff and Janet's attorney. Scanduro, okay, some parts of your testimony where you referred to, quote, my company, unquote, or, quote, our profit, unquote, or, quote, our deal, unquote. You were referring to Henderson Auctions, that is JAH. Is that right? Henderson, right. So to the extent you use the word I or the personal pronouns, you were referring to these transactions to the company, correct? Answer, I can say that generally. I started the company 60 years ago. Right. It's transpired and changed, and probably JAH was formed. I can't remember, but, and then, yes, sir, I just don't want there to be confusion. When you refer to my company, when you refer to our company, when you refer to I did this or I did that, you're not saying that you actually own JAH. And his response is, exactly, I'm not. So you can see the interesting dynamics that are taking place. There is much, much more to these depositions, but we thought we'd go ahead and give you just a little bit of a little preview. Like I said, we're going to be delivering about 5 or 6 series on this. We'll have the next one out next week. You're going to find it incredibly intriguing, as we trust you've done in this very first feature, in which a multimillionaire has apparently been relegated down to not even having $20 to buy milk. Thank you so much, and we look forward to bringing you segment 2 on this fascinating series.